of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is organizing a virtual program on how to obtain your Canadian CPA. This program is designed for particularly the Memorandum of Understanding between Canada and India that allowed Indian CA to write just the final CPA exam in Canada. The basic process for obtaining a Canadian CPA, the nature of the common final exam, including what the exam test, how to prepare for the CFE, and how it differs from the Indian CA. Today, our respected chairman of CIRC, Atul Mehrotra ji, with us, and our today's eminent speaker, CA Ira Malfish and CA Michael Levy is with us. We welcome you, sir, in today's program. I request to our chairman CIRC for welcome speech.
Thank you, Lokesh ji, the chairman, right hand with CIRC, secretary of the CIRC, Lokesh Maheshwari ji from Kota, the learned speaker of today's webinar, Ice Walfish ji, and another speaker, Michael ji, the young dynamic moderator of today's VCM, Rohan, and my other colleagues in the region. Very good afternoon to all of you. As said by Lokesh ji, our members from the entire CIRC are willing to expand their services, their professional skills with the global opportunities. So we were in touch, we are still in touch with various countries who are having such professional services where we can create a network, we can expand our professional services and vice versa. So thanks to CIRC team for organizing this very important webinar on how to obtain your Canadian CPA. And it is a great pleasure for all of us that both the learned speakers are our professional colleagues from Canada itself. So I welcome you all, and now I request our moderator for today's program to proceed further. Thank you. Once again, I welcome on behalf of CIRC. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words. Canada is currently a very lucrative destination for Indians. With its booming economy, flourishing Indian community, and an enhanced quality of life. The CIRC has collaborated with the past CPA Institute of Canada to help brilliant and ambitious CAs and CA aspirants to obtain a charter, one of the most sought after charters, that is the CPA Canada. I am CA Rohan Mehrotra, the moderator for today's session. I would now like to introduce Mr. Michael Levi.
Hi.
Mr. Levi has a BCom from the University of Toronto, an MBA from York Business School, and he's also a chartered accountant. Michael has been keenly involved over the last 10 years in both developing and teaching a course specifically designed for Indian CAs who are interested in pursuing their Canadian CPA. I welcome you, sir. Please move forward with your session.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's session. As was pointed out by the other speakers, what we're going to be focusing on today is obtaining a Canadian CPA. I'm now going to share my screen and we can get started with the presentation. Can everybody see my screen? I'm assuming people can see it. Is that right?
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, before I get started with the session, I'd just like to start by saying that I welcome any questions people have. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I'm very happy to answer any questions people have. I'm sure people will have many questions. And if you have a question, my preference would be that you ask your question by speech. Just speak up and please ask your question orally. I've also opened up my chat box. So in case you don't want to ask your question orally, I will be doing my best, and Ira will be doing his best to keep an eye on the chat box so that we can answer questions both orally and through the chat box. But if it's all the same to you, our preference would be that you ask the questions orally. It's much better that way. So as was pointed out, my name is Mike Levy. I'm a co-director of the PASS course. My partner, Ira Walfish, is with us today too. And I just want to welcome Ira. I'll be doing part of the session. I'll be doing the first part of the session, and then the second part of the session will be done by my partner, Ira Walfish. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. But before we do, just an important word. The Canadian CPA is very doable. Ira and I have been teaching Indian CAs now since around 2012. So we have a lot of experience teaching Indian CAs. And the one thing we found is that you can be successful in this exam. When you're dealing with the Canadian CPA exam, it's not like the Indian CA exam where you have single-digit pass rates. The pass rates are quite high. And quite frankly, if I could be blunt, Indian CAs are smart. We find that they're very clever because bottom line is if they weren't clever, they wouldn't have an Indian CA. So we're dealing with people who are very, very strong technically and very bright. So is it easy to get a Canadian CPA? The answer is no. It takes a great deal of work. But is there potential for success? There's no question there is. Many, many of our students have gone on and done very well on the exams. It requires a lot of persistence. It requires discipline. It requires determination. And most importantly, it requires hard work. But with guidance from PASS, got a very, very doable exam. So let's get started now on what we're going to be covering today. What we're going to be doing is we're going to start by talking about just an overview of the program. We'll just give you a bird's eye view of what the program looks like, for what the CPA program in Canada looks like, and exactly what an Indian CA would need to do in order to obtain a Canadian CPA. We'll talk about two very important aspects of obtaining a Canadian CPA. One important aspect of obtaining the CPA is the ability to write cases. One of the major differences between the Indian CA and the Canadian CPA exam is that the Canadian CPA exam isn't purely technical like the Indian exam. It's very much a case-based exam. As you'll see, you have to write fairly lengthy cases. So one of the things you need to learn in order to be successful in this exam is how to write cases. It's something that everybody can learn, but it does take time. The second component is technical. You do need strong technical skills. As I mentioned earlier, from a technical perspective, it's not as difficult as the Indian CA, but nevertheless, there is a fair amount of technical material that you need to master. Some of it will be similar to what you learned in India. Other material will be new. For example, things like tax would of course be new, and various other things we'll talk about later. After we talk about mastering case writing and preparing your technical, we'll then move on to part 3. Part 3 will talk about a program that PASS developed specifically with Indian students in mind. Because we have a lot of experience with Indian students, what we've done over the years is we've developed a program separate from the program that we offer to Canadian students, specifically designed with the needs of Indian CAs. And Ira will describe this program to you just a little bit later. We'll also talk about schedules, timing, etc. for writing the CPA. We'll share with you just a few testimonials from previous students who've taken the PASS course and been successful. In part 6, we'll just very briefly talk about registration with PASS, and then finally we'll speak very briefly about registration with the CPA Provincial Institute. In addition to registering with PASS, you need to register with a provincial institute in Canada. Canada is made up of 10 provinces, and you would be writing in one of those provinces. And depending on where you're planning to write your exam, you would need to register with a CPA Provincial Institute. We'll talk about that at the end of the class. So let's take a look just at the last point, part number 8. Part number 8 is simply contacting PASS. I'm sure that, people will ask questions during the session, but, it wouldn't surprise me if after you leave the session, you suddenly think, oh, I wish I would have asked a particular question. I still have further questions. One of the nice things about PASS is that Ira and I are always accessible. So we'll share our contact information with you at the end of the session. We welcome you to contact us should you have any further questions following the session. Just do keep in mind, though, that there's a 10.5-hour difference between our countries. So it's now about 6:45 in Canada. So we can just keep, in case you're going to be making a phone call, you can just keep that in mind. So by just giving you a bird's eye view of the CPA program in Canada and the CP. The CP is the acronym for Common Final Exam. This is the final exam that a person has to write in order to obtain a Canadian CPA. So let me just give you a bird's eye view. Let's start with what a Canadian student would do, and then we can talk about what an Indian student does because of the MOU. Because of the MOU, as Atul mentioned earlier, you're going to really be doing a truncated program where you get to go directly to the final exam. A typical Canadian student has to begin by doing 2 technical modules. So the way that would work is that they would have to basically take a module which would take 6 or 7 weeks. One module would focus on financial accounting, and another module would focus primarily on management accounting. And at the end of each of these 2 modules, they have to write an exam. Then after that, they have to take 2 elective modules, and they can choose from tax, assurance, performance management, or finance. And they would have to do two of these, any 2 of the 4 that I just mentioned, and once again, write exams. So they have to write 4 exams. Following that, a typical Canadian student would move on to Capstone 1. In Capstone 1, students work as a group on a big business case where they're dealing with high-level business issues. And then in Capstone, then it would have to move on to Capstone 2. In Capstone 2, a typical Canadian student would be writing prior CP cases to practice for the real CP. So it's quite a lengthy program for a typical Canadian student. The nice thing about being an Indian CA is because of this MOU, an Indian CPA would move directly to the CP. So an Indian CPA would not have to do the 2 technical modules in financial and management accounting, or the 2 elective modules, or Capstone 1 or Capstone 2. So it's a very much truncated program. Now, what some of you may be thinking, if I could venture to guess, what some of you may be thinking is, but if I don't do these modules, will I be prepared for the CP? It's nice to be exempt from these modules, but will I be okay? The answer is you will, because when PASS developed the program for Indian CAs, we took into account these exemptions. So we will cover off in the technical portion of the course the various technical material that you otherwise would have covered off in these modules. So you'll be well prepared. Now, for those of you who are considering writing your CP in 2023, the very next CP is at the end of May. It's a 3-day exam going from May 30th to June 1st. And then there's a second CP in September, from September 12th to the 14th. The CP sits twice a year, in May and in September. For those of you who don't think you'd like to write in the current year, the bottom line, for those of you who don't think you'd like to write in 2023, there is a CP in 2024. Again, 2 CPs, one May 28th to May 30th, and the other September 10th to 12th. The exact date changes from year to year, but one CP is always at the end of May, and one CP is always in the first part of September. So just to summarize, a typical Canadian student starts with the 4 technical modules, financial accounting and management accounting, and the 2 electives, moves on to Capstone 1 and 2, and then writes the final exam, the CP, which stands for Common Final Exam. Indian CAs are exempt from the technical modules and Capstone 1 and 2, and move on directly to the CP. Any questions before I provide an overview of the CP, the exam that you would all need to write? Okay, if there are no questions, I'll move on to a description of the CP. The CP is, as I mentioned earlier, a case-based exam. There are no multiple choice questions. There are no short answer questions. The exam is fully a case-based exam. Now, although I've been told that recently there are some small cases that are being added to the Indian CA exam, the cases we're talking about here are much larger. They deal with multiple issues and they deal with multiple topics. So in one case, you can have a whole slew of different topics. The time for the cases can range anywhere from 70 minutes to as long as 5 hours. And I'll explain this in more detail very, very shortly. On a short case, which would be a case ranging from 70 to 90 minutes, you may need to read 5 or 6 pages. On a long case, you may need to read as much as 15 to 20 pages. So that's why I said earlier, one of the skills that PASS is going to teach you is how to deal with these cases. I can tell you now that it'll seem very, very daunting when you first start writing cases. And it seems like, boy, this is really, really difficult. How am I ever going to master this? But you'll be surprised that with practice, you can master it. There's a huge learning curve, and you need to write a number of cases before you can actually master your case writing, but it is very doable. PASS recognizes that because Indian CAs don't have much practice with case writing, in the Indian CA process, they need a lot of practice. That's why we build very many cases into the PASS program. A case typically begins, if you want to understand in your own mind what a typical CP case looks like, a typical CP case starts with a one-pager, a one-page main body, followed by multiple appendices. So this is an example of the first page of a CP case. On the first page, you have the main body of the case, and following the main body of the case, you then have multiple appendices with information in it. On the shorter cases, you might have 3 or 4 appendices. On a longer case, you may have more than that. Now, the CP is a 3-day exam. Let's take a look at the 3 days. The first day, and we'll get into a little more detail on this on the following slides. On the first day, there's one large 4-hour case, which we often refer to at PASS, we refer to it as a comp. The day 1 case is based on capstone 1, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment. The day 2 case is a large 5-hour case. We refer to that as the roll comp, because as we'll explain in a few minutes, on day 2, you actually choose a specific role. The day 3 cases, these are the shorter cases that I referred to earlier. On day 3, you're writing 3 short cases. By short cases, I mean cases that are anywhere from 70 to 90 minutes. The 3 cases combined will be 4 hours. So for example, you could have 3 cases that are 80 minutes long each. That would add up to 240 minutes or 4 hours. Or one case might be 90 minutes, another might be 70 minutes, but it all adds up to 4 hours. All of the cases test more than one competency. So on this exam, there is no such a thing as a single subject case. There are 6 competencies that you can be examined on the CP. And the bottom line is these are the 6 competencies: audit and assurance, financial reporting, management accounting, finance, taxation, and strategy and governance. So every case will test more than one of these. So there's no such a thing as a case that only includes financial reporting or only includes management accounting. You'll have more than one of these competencies tested on each case. How many can be tested on a given case? We're going to address that right now.
Michael, I think someone has their hand up for a question.
Really, I don't see a hand, but by all means, ask. I'm not seeing any hand, but please, by all means, please ask.
1 second, I'll just. Mr. Mohammed.
Mohammed?
Do you want to ask a question, Mr. Mohammed? I think there's another question.
Yeah.
Sumrita, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, really? Sure, nobody has a question?
Actually, I just wanted to ask that all the competencies would be checked or only one, but then I think you answered that all competencies can be checked. So I thought it is a subject which we have to prepare, or it's an area which would be tested on the question.
Are you asking me whether all of the competencies will be tested?
Yeah, like I'm asking that it is a choice, like we'll choose finance as a topic and on that the case studies would happen, or all topics have to be prepared for every case study?
Okay, it's a very good question. And I'm actually going to address that in the next 2 or 3 slides. If I don't fully answer your question, please let me know, but I will be addressing that in the next 2 or 3 slides.
Thank you.
No problem. Was there, I thought I saw 2 participants had questions. Is there anyone else who had a question?
There was a question before in the chat box. This is Ira speaking. I'll just address that. Someone wanted to know if they write, can they write the CFI in India? So the answer is not at the moment. The CFI has to be written in Canada. So as a minimum, everyone would have to come to Canada in order to write the CFI for the 3 days.
Thank you. So let's take a look now at the 3 days of the CFI. The first day of the CFI, you're going to write one large 4-hour case. And I mentioned earlier that day 1 of the CFI is based on the case that's used in Capstone 1. Let me explain. In Capstone 1, that is the name of a module that all Canadian students have to attend, which Indian students do not need to attend. In that module, which is about 7 weeks, students work on a group on a big case based on a particular company. And they have to deal with high-level strategic and operating issues. When you enter day 1 of the CFI, you'll be dealing with the same company that came up in the Capstone 1 module, but the company is now a number of years down the road, and they've got new strategic and operating issues to deal with, and that's what you're going to have to deal with on day 1. Day 1 is not intended to be a very technical day. It's intended to test your softer skills, your business acumen, your ability to deal with judgment, high-level business decisions. What many people from India are often concerned about, and with good reason, is how am I going to deal with day 1 if it's based on Capstone 1 when I didn't attend Capstone 1? Because as an Indian student, you're not required to attend Capstone 1. And if you don't attend Capstone 1, how are you going to be ready to deal with day 1? So PASS fully recognizes that. What we're going to do is we're going to help you. We are going to give you a summary of all of the background information relating to the Capstone 1 case so that you are fully familiar with the Capstone 1 case and on equal footing with a Canadian CA who has actually attended Capstone 1. So you will not be at any disadvantage. Now, somebody mentioned describe the pathway route. Basically, the pathway route there is really just, you're just going to go directly to the CP. So for a normal Canadian CPA, as we described earlier, there's a whole long path you have to follow. But as an Indian CA, you would go directly to the final exam. And exactly how you would prepare, that's where PASS would come in and assist you. Now, day 1 of the CP is marked separately from day 2 and 3. Okay, so it's almost like a separate exam. As you'll see later, if you, for example, let's say you pass day 1, but you don't pass day 2 and 3, you don't have to write day 1 again, and vice versa. So as I mentioned earlier, day 1 is intended to be the non-technical day. You'll be dealing with really a lot of business type issues. You might deal with strategy issues, governance. You might be dealing with SWOT, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. They're really testing your basic business skills more than your technical skills. Day 2 of the CP, we're now getting into the more technical part of the exam. This is a bit of an endurance test because it's quite long. It's one big 5-hour case. At PASS, we often refer to it as the roll comp. That's not really the official name. The official name is Day 2 case, but we often refer to it as a roll comp because that is a day where you do actually choose a role. Somebody was asking about choice. This is a day where what they test you on is really going to be, to some degree, your choice. Let me explain. The way that Day 2 is designed is as follows. The case is going to test financial accounting and or management accounting, usually both. In the last 2 years, they've always tested both. So all of the students, whether they like it or not, everybody is going to have to address requireds relating to financial accounting and management accounting in all likelihood. They only have to test one, but they'll probably test two. So at the end of the day, everybody will likely have to deal with financial accounting and management accounting. But in addition to that, you get to choose a role. The 4 roles you can choose from are audit and assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. So those are the roles you can choose from. Now, let's say, for example, I choose assurance. That's probably the most popular role that people choose. So what would happen then is when I write on Day 2, I'm going to be tested on 3 competencies. Financial accounting and management accounting, everybody has to deal with that, plus assurance, my chosen role. If the person sitting next to me chose finance as their role, they're going to deal with financial accounting and management accounting and finance. So the maximum number of competencies that you'll deal with on Day 2 of the exam is 3. Financial accounting and management accounting, plus one of the 4 competencies that you chose. And it's entirely up to you which one you choose. Now, for some people, it's an absolute no-brainer when it comes to choosing a particular role. Some people work in assurance, they know assurance, so it's a no-brainer to choose assurance. Others know finance inside out, and they work in finance, no-brainer. There are other people where they're really not so sure. Maybe they know assurance academically, but they work in finance or vice versa. In that type of situation, PASS would help you choose your role. Every year, we have many students who will contact Ira or myself, and we'll help them choose their role. The nice thing is you don't have to worry about that for now. You don't choose your role till much, much later on in the process. Day 3 of the CP, you're going to be tested on each case on about 4 to 6 competencies. So if we go back to the competencies, at least 4 of these will typically come up on a case, and as many as 6 can come up on a case. Over the course of the whole Day 3, all 6 competencies will come up more than once. So somebody was asking earlier about choosing. At the end of the day, in order to write this exam, you have to be comfortable with all 6 competencies. So at the end of the day, even though on Day 2, you'll only be tested on 3 competencies, on Day 3, you're tested in all 6 competencies, so you have to be comfortable with all 6. Now, does that mean that I need to know all 6 equally well? The answer is no. On Day 3, where they test all 6 competencies, they're not going to test any of the competencies at that high a level. On Day 2, what they will do is they will test the role that you chose at a higher level. So let's say, for example, I chose audit and assurance as my role on Day 2. Audit and assurance, I would need to know at a higher level than other topics. If I chose performance management on Day 2 as my role, I will need to know performance management better than other topics. Somebody I can see in the chat box asked about visas. If you don't mind, I'm just going to finish talking about Day 3 because I just want to finish a topic before I move on to something else, and then we can address your question. Day 2 and Day 3 are marked together. These are the 2 technical days. So if you're successful, you don't necessarily have, if you're only unsuccessful in one part of the exam, you don't need to repeat the whole exam. So as I mentioned earlier, if somebody, for example, fails Day 1, but they pass Day 2 and 3, they would only have to repeat Day 1. If they fail Day 2 and 3, but they pass Day 1, they would only have to repeat Day 2 and 3. They would not have to repeat Day 1. Amadi is asking, can we appear for the CP on a tourist visa or it needs to be a student visa? To be honest with you, that will depend on where you register. If you're going to be writing out west, okay, so let's say, for example, you're going to be going to one of our Western provinces. So you're going to be going to, let's say, Manitoba or Alberta or British Columbia or Saskatchewan. In those provinces, you would be registering with something called the CPA Western School of Business. So Vancouver, for example, you would be registering with the CPA Western School of Business. They insist that you have a student visa, and they will assist you in getting that student visa. In order to get a student visa, you have to be attending a designated learning institution. And what will happen is they will provide you with the documentation so you can get your student visa. Because in order to register with CPA Western School of Business, you need a student visa. In Ontario, they tend to be a little bit more liberal. The attitude in Ontario is, as long as Immigration Canada will allow you to come in and write an exam, use whatever visa you wish. So in Ontario, it should not be a problem to write with a student, with a, say, for example, the tourist visa. So let's say, for example, you're coming to Toronto. Toronto is the major hub, major city in Ontario. Toronto is the city in Ontario that has by far the largest Indian Canadian population. For Toronto, you wouldn't necessarily need a student visa. They're a little more lax here in Ontario when it comes to visas. Here are some key facts about the CP. Everyone in Canada writes the same CP exam. It's a national exam. My pleasure. Sumitra, I'll just address your question in just a moment. Everyone in Canada writes the same CP exam. It's a national exam. It doesn't matter where you write. You have 3 attempts to write the exam. Hopefully you won't need all 3 attempts. Based on our experience, it's very rare for a student to need all 3 attempts. You write the exam on a computer and you have access to Word and Excel. The question itself, the case itself, is on paper, so you'll be handed a physical exam to write, but you type up the exam, and when it comes to the qualitative portion of the exam, you're using Word. When it comes to the number crunching, you're using Excel. Of course, you would also have a calculator for minor calculations, but major calculations you would do on Excel. It's effectively an open book exam because you will have access during the exam to an electronic form of the CPA handbook. The CPA handbook has the accounting and assurance standards. So you can look up a particular accounting standard or a particular assurance standard during the exam. You'll also have access to the Canadian Tax Act electronically, although it's highly unlikely that you'll ever refer to the Tax Act on your exam. I've never seen the Indian Tax Act, but I can tell you the Canadian Tax Act has 100-word sentences you'd never be able to understand. I never ever used the Tax Act. So it's unlikely you would ever be using the Tax Act on your exam, but you do have access to it. As we'll discuss during the course, you may very well be accessing the handbook during the exam. It doesn't matter in which Canadian province you write the exam. So it's immaterial. You can write the exam in one province and then practice in another province. And I think that's the question that Sumitra is asking. Sumitra says, does a province restrict you to getting a job in that province? By no means. The beauty of the Canadian CPA is once you have it, you can practice anywhere. And it's not at all unusual for people to move from province to province. My late father was a CA. He got his CA, in those days, it was called a CA in Canada too. He got his CA in Montreal, and then he moved to Toronto. No problem at all.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one quick thing here, as Michael is saying. The way it works basically is you register with a province, and the province that you register, you have to write the CFE in that province. But you could literally write the CFE in Ontario, and then the next day move to another province. You could even be living in another province, register in Ontario. You could live in Vancouver. You could fly to Ontario for 3 days, write the exam, and then fly back to Vancouver. So outside of the province, no one outside of the institute where you write the exam, nobody really cares. In other words, down the road for job opportunities or anything, it is irrelevant where you wrote the exam. It really does not make any difference whatsoever. And Simrita's asking, could you please repeat, does the province restrict you? So no, the province is not restricting you to get a job of that province. So you simply have to write the exam in the location, like in the province that you register as a student. Oh, okay, Simrita, I'm not sure, you're asking me to repeat the last thing. I'm not sure what the last thing is that I mentioned. Can you be more specific? Oh, regarding flyback. No, what I was saying is that I could live in one location in the country. I could live in Vancouver. I could be a student in Ontario. I would have to write the exam in Ontario. So I would fly from Vancouver to Ontario for 3 days to write the exam and then fly back to Vancouver. The voice broke down. Okay. Does that make sense? Did everyone hear that? Yes. Okay, good. Sorry, Michael.
No problem. Thank you, Ara. What I'd like to talk about now is studying for the exam in terms of the case writing versus the technical. I can't overstress the importance of the case writing. At the end of the day, you can have the best technical skills in the world, and you still won't be successful if you don't know how to write cases. So the major job that PASS has is to teach you how to master case writing, which, as I mentioned earlier, is not easy, but certainly very much doable with practice. The earlier you begin writing cases, the better, because there's a huge learning curve. Some people master case writing more quickly than others, but for some people, it will take a number of months until they really master their case writing. That's why the earlier you begin working on the exam and the earlier you begin your case writing, the better off you are. Studying about a year in advance is normal, although it doesn't necessarily have to be a full year. For example, we have students who just registered literally in the last week for our course for the upcoming CP in May. So November to May would be sufficient. But this is not the sort of exam where you can start working on the exam 3 months before the exam and pass. Very, very unlikely. It takes a number of months in order to master the case writing, and therefore you do need quite a bit of time to prepare. Now, as we're going to stress later on, this is not an exam where you need to take off from work in order to pass the exam. You don't have to spend, 6 months or a year having no income in order to write this exam. Almost all of the students who write the CP are working most of the time while they're studying, okay? The norm in Canada is for a student to first get a job, and once they have a job, begin studying for the CP. Some people take off a little time right before the exam, but during most of the study period, people are working. Now, unlike India, you're writing these practical cases while you're studying your technical. One of the questions I just had last night when I was teaching a class for Indian CAs is, do I need to master my technical before I can write these cases? And the answer is no. You're simultaneously writing cases and learning your technical. The two are going hand in hand. Now, when it comes to technical, the two biggest areas to focus on are financial accounting. For financial accounting, in Canada, we've got two gaps that you need to know. One gap, which many of you or almost all of you probably know already, is IFRS. And that's international, so many, if not all of you, are familiar with it. The other gap is ASPE. ASPE, nobody in India will be familiar with, or unless you happen to work on Canadian companies in your firm. ASPE basically is a Canadian developed gap, which is intended for private companies. Are there differences between IFRS and ASPE? Yes, but there's also a lot of overlap. In the technical sessions at PASS, we will review IFRS as well as ASPE. So we'll point out to you what are the differences between IFRS and ASPE so that you're well prepared. The second, biggest area on the exam is management accounting. So the two most heavily tested areas on the exam are financial accounting and management accounting. Would I spend an equal amount of time on both? The answer is no, because at the end of the day, there's a lot more to know in financial accounting than management accounting. So even though these are the biggest areas tested on the exam, most heavily tested areas, I would spend a lot more time on financial accounting than management accounting, simply because the body of knowledge is far greater in financial accounting. Now, one particular challenge from a technical perspective for Indian CAs is tax, because unlike the case of financial accounting, where there's a huge amount of overlap between what you learned in India and what you need for the Canadian exam, tax is obviously quite different because every country has its own tax act. The Canadian Tax Act will certainly be quite different from the Indian Tax Act. So yes, there is a fair amount of new knowledge that you're going to have to acquire in tax. But here's the good news. Unless you choose taxation as your role on day 2, and it is extremely unusual for an Indian CA to do that, you don't need to know a lot of the complexities of Canadian tax, because the only day of the CP where they will test the real heavy-duty complexities of tax planning is day 2, if you choose taxation as your role, which almost nobody in India does. Therefore, you're only going to need to know tax for the other days of the CP, and for that, you don't need to know a lot of the complexities. Do you need to know the basics? You certainly do. You need to know basic compliance, but the complexities of tax planning will only come up on day 2. So for example, when I say you need to know compliance, what I mean is you would need to know the basics of calculating taxable income, both on a corporate basis as well as a personal basis. You'd need to know what's taxable, what's deductible, the basic rules. We'll provide you with obviously good material, detailed material on tax, bearing in mind that you're coming into this with no background in Canadian tax. We'll also be providing you with videos that you can watch dealing with Canadian tax. Plus, you'll also have a chance to learn Canadian tax through your practice case writing, because every time you write a case that has a required dealing with tax, as part of your own personal debriefing, you'll be going over the solution, and that will be another way in which you can learn your tax. Now, what about the other 3 competencies, audit and assurance, finance, and governance? I find that for audit, a large part of audit, you learn from your case writing, because the most significant portion of assurance or audit, I'll use the words interchangeably, a significant portion of this deals with things like planning, procedures, controls, and for that, textbook knowledge is not all that important. What's important is the ability to apply it, to apply your skills. And how do I learn how to apply my planning skills, or my skills for dealing with procedures, or my skills for dealing with controls? Through case writing. So you're going to learn a lot of the assurance through case writing. We're also going to give you technical material, because there are a few areas where you just simply need to read the technical material, but a large part of the knowledge you need in assurance will come from the case writing. The nice thing about assurance is a large part of it will be similar to what you learned in India. Yes, there are certain things that are specific to Canada, but the real basic nitty-gritty of planning and procedures and controls is the same pretty much anywhere in the world. The finance on the CP, unless you choose it as your role on day 2, is very, very basic. A large part of finance is really just basic number crunching, maybe doing an NPV analysis, or maybe doing a projected cash flow. Very, very number crunchy. And a large part of finance, once again, you will be learning from the case writing. Yes, we will give you notes to work with, and you'll want to review the past notes. But again, finance, unless you choose it as your depth area or as your role on day 2, very, very basic. The last competency, strategy and governance, is pretty much 98% common sense. So although we provide you with notes on governance, I'll tell you straight out, the notes will not be very helpful. Because at the end of the day, strategy and governance is not very technical. It's basically strategy and governance pretty much tests your basic business acumen, your basic ability to deal with business issues. And that's something where you just have to get used to using your business acumen, common sense, and practice case writing. There isn't much in the way of technical that you need to study. Does anybody have any questions before I hand over the virtual floor to my partner, Ira? Okay, if nobody has any questions, then what I'm going to do now is pass over the virtual floor to Ira, who will describe the program that PASS developed for Indian CAs.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I guess if you stop.
Yeah, I'm going to now stop sharing, and then Ira can share his screen with you.
And I'll share my screen. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, is my screen showing? Can everybody see? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
You can see the screen. Okay, great. So make sure I have the chat box. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Michael. As Michael said, if you have any questions as I'm going through, just ask. Someone's asking about visa. Mohammed's asked about visa requirements. I will explain that kind of near the end. We talk a little bit about immigration. So I'll explain that afterwards. And Samrita's asked the same thing as application and timings. Yeah, please explain the more viable visas, applications, and timings to apply. So look, we're not going to get into detail with respect to visas and things like that. As Michael was saying, we have people that write this exam from India. Either they have a PR, which they apply for from India, or they come in with a work or student visa, or they come in with a tourist visa, which is good for Ontario. So we have different avenues that people come from India to write the exam, here. So I don't know if that's answering everything that you're asking, but those are really the methods that people come to Canada in order to write the exam. Okay. Just a few minutes very briefly on who I guess we are. So we've been teaching for a lot of years. We began in 1989. Over the years, we have offered our training course to all of the 4 large firms, which I'm sure people have heard of: PwC, KPMG, EY, and Deloitte, and many other mid-sized firms. Currently, we run the PwC program across Canada. Michael did tremendously well in his CFE. At that point, it was known as the UFE. He was actually the gold medalist in Ontario, which means basically the #1 person in the whole province of Ontario. And overall, the feedback, we're happy to say, has been good from students. As Michael was saying, that we have a lot of Indian students over the last number of years. And overall, I think they've learned a lot and they've been able to pass the exam and do very well in Canada. Someone is asking about financial opportunities. Just look, the CA, or what we call the CPA in Canada, is a very good degree. The financial and job opportunities are very good. Even better, combined with work experience, for example, that you would have in India or elsewhere. So overall, the financial opportunities are very good. It is a very respected degree. And when you have a CPA, you are very marketable across many industries, not just public accounting, but financial industries and just industry in general. So I'm talking about, I'm not sure, Yogendra's asking, oh, okay. So again, some people are asking, so, maybe I'll deal with these afterwards. I'll just finish off, we're dealing with PATS, and then I'll come back to some of these questions about salaries and things like that. Sorry?
We can take the questions later on after the end of the session.
Yeah, we could talk about that, job opportunities and salaries. I can, I can address that.
Sure.
Okay. So as Michael was saying, basically what we did is we set up a program specifically for international, of which most are from India, a specific course that includes the different elements you need to pass this exam: technical training, case writing, and what we call personal counseling. Some of the course is self-study. This is like an overall bird's eye view. Some of the course is self-study. You have a binder, you have a technical binder, hard copy, as well as an online copy. You read the binder, you watch videos that explain the topics in the binder. And then we have formal instruction. By formal instruction, we mean you write cases, we mark them, you email the cases to us. We have live online sessions. We do everything live online Canadian time, but we also do a lot of the sessions IST time. Anything that you don't watch live, you can always watch recorded. You have access to all the videos. There's no maximum or limits or anything like that. As long as you have an internet connection, you can go watch a video. So if you miss a class, we're doing live online on a Tuesday night, for example. Wednesday, we upload it, and you can go in and you can watch the entire session. As Michael was saying, I'm just going to go quickly on some of these. The technical study, what we mean by technical study, we mean learning for example, financial accounting, the different sections in the handbook for financial accounting. The handbook has many different sections, just like I'm sure in India. So that's what we mean by technical studying. We mean simply knowing the technical financial accounting, knowing the technical management accounting. And as Michael said, the two new topics for people from India would be tax, as well as the ASPE, the accounting rules for private companies in Canada. Those would be really the two newest, areas. Yeah, somebody was asking again about exam centers. The only place you can write this exam is in Canada, in one of the provinces. Unfortunately, there is no other place. You cannot write this exam in India. You cannot write this exam in the UAE. You have to come to Canada once to write the exam. That would be the only time you'd have to come to Canada, really, for 3 days. And then you could fly back to India, but you would have to write the exam in Canada. Okay, so I'm just looking if there's anything else here. Okay. The case writing. So Michael spent a lot of time explaining case writing. Basically, you write a lot of these cases. We mark a lot of these cases, not everyone. Sometimes you write a case, you mark yourself, you look at the solution. You have to have a solution in order to mark the case. But you look at the solution and you mark your own case. So some of that's self-study. And other cases, we mark, you email the cases, you're writing in Word and Excel, and you email them to me. We have markers, and the marker will sit there with your case and will mark your case and give it back to you with comments and feedback. Okay. We actually have, you may want to watch, we're going to give you this PowerPoint presentation. You may want to watch an example. You can actually watch a whole example of a case take-up or of a technical class where we're teaching technical. We actually have examples on YouTube that you can actually watch, and you can literally see us taking a case up and what exactly that entails. Okay. Again, I'm going to deal with some of these questions in a few minutes. Just so you know what this means, I said the words personal counseling before. So what that actually means is you meet with a marker, let's say over Zoom, the marker who marked your case, and you spend half an hour, and the marker goes over your case with you. It's a personal session. It's a one-on-one session where the marker, you have your case in front of you. The marker has your case. The marker marked it. And now what they're doing is they're explaining what you did right, what you didn't do right, and they're going over that for half an hour. We do about 3 of those sessions, which is, to be honest, more than sufficient. We do 3 of those sessions over the course, over the whole program. Now, Michael kind of explained this as part of the whole Canadian students, as part of the whole process. Canadian students have to take what's called Capstone 1 and 2. You do not have to do this from India. You do not have to take Capstone 1 and 2. Even though Capstone 1 affects the first day of the CFE, we will give you enough training in Capstone 1 to write day 1. And Capstone 2, which is effectively practice case writing, that I'm going to show you in a minute when I talk about the fees. You will actually have a choice of Capstone 2, doing it through us or not doing it at all. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute when we talk about the fees. All right, just some practical things. As I said before, we offer the sessions live online. We don't offer all of them based on IST time. By IST time, I mean 7 o'clock in the evening, let's say. We do some of them, but whatever we don't do live, you will have a recording. You could just go in, watch the video. Okay. All right, so this is just a breakdown, like how, just to give you some idea, like there are a lot of videos, which by the way, does not mean you have to watch every single video, but we do have a lot of videos. We mark a lot of cases, and the 3 counting sessions I've already pointed out. Okay, now, people, Michael mentioned there are 2 times to write this exam, either at the end of May or in the middle of September. If you write in September, we have 2 versions of the course. This is not a major point. I just want to explain it because if you go to our website, you will see it. And if you do register for a September sitting, you will also see you have a choice of version 1 and version 2. The only difference is in version 1, you would write some of the cases earlier rather than later. In version 2, you would write those same cases later, let's say in the summer. So for example, let's pretend you sign up now for next September, September 2023. We would recommend most people take version 1. And in version 1, you're going to be writing some of the cases in the winter months, January, February, March, our winter. If you take version 2, you'll still have some sessions before the summer, but some of those cases that you would have written in version 1 in January, February, March, you'll write in July. That is the only difference between version 1 and 2. It is not really such a big deal. You can switch between the versions. It doesn't really matter. You just have to select one when you register. It's really more depending on when you register. If you register before January, you can take version 1. You can write those cases earlier. It's always an advantage to write these cases earlier rather than later. That's all. That's the only difference between the 2 versions. Everything really is the same. It's only a timing difference. Okay. As Michael mentioned, start earlier, very active. This is not a full-time job. You work full-time. I'll even be a little more specific. How many hours of studying? How many hours of studying a week? I don't know, 10, 15 hours a week. That would be good. So starting now for May is perfectly fine. Starting now for September is also good. Okay. And not only that, please look at the last point on this slide, because this really does affect, I think, a lot of people, especially when we get into immigration issues and things like that. You can sign up for May. You can register with us. You plan on writing May of 2023. And then you change your mind. It doesn't matter why. You're busy. Immigration's an issue. You don't want to write in May. It doesn't matter what the reason is. You want to write in September. You send us an email. We move you into the September batch and you keep studying. You know, we organize it with the classes and you keep studying for September. There is no additional cost. Simrita's asking a good question about May. Would your fees be wasted? Okay, so I'm going to talk about fees in a minute. There is a possibility of that, but let me explain it when I show you fees. I'll explain. Okay, just give me a minute. I'll explain to you exactly how that impacts the fees. What I'm saying at the moment is that there's no additional fees for our course. I will talk about in a second about the CFE. What it is not is a waste of time. That's an important point. Let's say you start studying for May and then you switch to September. You didn't waste 1 minute of time. Everything you studied, beautiful. You can use that in September. That's good. In some ways, it's even advantageous. Just means you got some studying under your belt and now you'll keep studying. So as long as you're writing in a future time period, you have not wasted any time whatsoever. Again, I'll talk about fees in a second. You have not wasted any time whatsoever. It's good. Whatever studying you did, beautiful. You wrote a case, good. No problem. That's going to help you for September. Okay. All right. I just mentioned this. How many hours a week? I don't know, 10, 15 hours a week would be good. And yes, you can work full time. No one is saying you need to quit your job. You do not need to quit your job. You can work full time while you're studying for the CFE. Does not matter where you are. Does not matter if you're in India, anywhere in the world, you can study for this exam. It really does not matter. Look, over the years, we have taught a lot of students. If you go to our website, you will see we have a lot of testimonials. These are all students from India that have written the exam. So I'm just showing you here. I'm just quickly showing you, I'm not going to bother reading these out. And you can see many, many testimonials we have from students who have written the exam and have passed and gone on to careers in accounting. Okay, so these are just some examples of testimonials where people were saying that we customize it, we give a lot of support. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, these are just a few examples. Again, you can see this on our website, Pass Your CPA. Okay, now this will address some of the questions people are asking about fees. So to register with us is very easy. You basically go to our website and you can register online. Once you register, we start you studying right away. What I mean by that, our classes for May just started. Our classes for January, our classes for September start in January. It doesn't matter if you register now for September. The classes begin in January, but I don't really care about that. We start you off by giving you a binder, a technical binder, and access to the videos. So you start watching the videos and studying the binder. As I said before, some of this is self-study. So it doesn't really matter when the classes start. The classes start, okay, fine. The classes start in January, good. But you start watching the videos and you start technical studying now. Whether or not there's a class tomorrow does not make a difference. That's what I mean when I say you start studying as soon as you register. We give you access both to the technical material online. We have the binders online and the videos. And that you get when you register. And then we also send you a hard copy binder. Now, people, we have two options I need to explain, and this will tie into the whole fees. So everyone look at option one. You take the past course only. You do not attend what we have. It's called an alternative to capstone 1 and 2. Or option number 2, you do attend an alternative to capstone 1 and 2. I will explain that. Let's look at the fees. This will answer some of the questions. Okay, this will answer some of the questions and also Simrita's question about the CFE. Okay, let's look at the fees, and Simrita, I'm going to answer your question in a second. All right. The course, option 1. You take our course with no alternative to capstone 1 and 2. The fee is $19.95. These are all Canadian dollars. We give a 15% discount. It is $16.95. There is an additional fee of $250. That is not paid to us. That is paid to the Institute in order to get the capstone 2 material. You don't have to do this $250, but everybody does it because you want the capstone 2 material. You are not attending capstone 2. You're from India. You don't need to attend capstone 2. But the material, the cases, you purchase. You want to purchase them. You don't have to, but you want to. So we add that in, and you will be buying this $250 because it's going to help you, give you more additional cases. So the total fee here is $19.45 Canadian. Okay, this is option 1. Now, let me just show you option 2 and you'll see the difference. In option 2, it's the same $19.95 minus 15%, $16.95. But here we mark more cases. Everyone see the $680. That is effectively capstone 2. What capstone 2 is practice case writing. Every week you write a case, you email it to us, we mark it, we send it back. Because we have to pay professional CPAs to mark your case, we have to charge for the case marking. That is $680. Effectively, you are doing capstone 2, but not through the Institute. You're doing it through us. And that is the additional $680. So this is option 2. You do not have to take option 2. You could do option 1. In both options, we mark many cases. The difference is volume. In option 1, we don't mark as many. Maybe we mark, I don't think we say it here exactly how many. It's about half. Do we say it here? Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, in option 1, everybody look at the bottom here. In option 1, if you want to see exactly, we mark 2 day 2 comps, 2 day 2 cases, and 8 day 3. So that's 10. In option 2, we mark more. We also mark 2 day 1 comps, 4 day 2, not 2, so we're up to 6, and 16 day 3. That is the difference in option 1 and 2. All the videos, all the material, all the classes are the same. The difference is in the last 7-8 weeks leading up to the CFI, in option 2, we mark more cases. In option 1, we don't mark those cases. You could do them on your own. Of course, we mark other cases. We would never give you a program. We don't mark cases. That's very important. We just mark fewer.
If I could just add something to what Ira said, he may have indicated this. I just want to stress this. Even if you go with option number 1, what the alternative to capstone 2 is accomplishing is, as Ira pointed out, because as an Indian CA, due to the MOU, you're not required to go to capstone 2. Most Indian CAs do not do so. During capstone 2, a typical Canadian CA would write a whole bunch of prior CFI cases and have them professionally marked. What we're doing in PASS in our alternative course to capstone 2 is we're doing something very similar to what CPA Canada is doing. We're having you write prior CFI cases and then we're marking them professionally. For people who choose option 1, they would still write these prior CFI cases, they would just mark it themselves. So whether you choose option 1 or option 2, you'd want to write the prior CP cases, just like Canadian students who go to Capstone 2. It's just a question of whether you're going to have them professionally marked by pass, which is option 2, or whether you're going to mark them on your own in option 1. But either way, very important to write these prior CP cases.
Say what they'll have to say. Not getting what they want to say, what they'll have to say. Okay. Okay. With regard to fees, people, if you have, I'm getting
Ira, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ira, but I see over here in the chat box, we never like there to be confusion. Somebody's saying if we don't have to, why will we want to? Lots of confusion. So I just want to make sure to dispel this confusion. If you're confused, you can tell me if I'm correct in my understanding. I think the confusion may relate to, if you don't have to do Capstone 2, why would you want to? I think that's the question. If that's the question, the answer is actually very simple. Capstone 2 is there for the benefit of the students. Capstone 2 is simply a module in which students write prior CP cases and they have them professionally marked in order to help them prepare for the CP. So in order to be well prepared for the CP, it's in your best interest to do the equivalent of Capstone 2 by writing prior CP cases. And with option 2, not only would you write these cases, but you'd have them professionally marked so that you get feedback. So keep in mind, even though you're not required to do Capstone 2, it's in your best interest to do so that you're well prepared. Does that dispel the confusion? Great, thank you.
Also, someone was asking, professionally marked simply means we give your case to an actual CPA in Canada and they mark your case. That's professionally marked. Someone has to know what they're doing to mark your case. They are an actual CPA. They're working full-time. So this is not their full-time job, but they want to earn extra money. They enjoy marking. They're a CPA, so they are marking your case. So they are sitting there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes with your case, only your case, and giving you comments on your case and marking it based on an answer. That is what we mean when we say professionally marked. Okay, the benefit is someone is asking, what's the benefit? Oh, there's a big benefit, because when you write a case, you want to know what you did right and what you did wrong. And now you have a professional CPA telling you, oh, this is good. I like that paragraph. You really zeroed in on the point. Oh, this is excellent. You really knew your technical over here. They're giving you comments on your case. They are typing in comments on your case and giving you feedback. That is part of what you're paying for in the whole course. You want to get that feedback so you learn how to write the next case, and you can do it even a little better because you got that feedback. That is the benefit of getting it professionally marked. Okay, someone is asking, do we need classes to pass the CPA? I mean, you know, look, do you need classes? I mean, everybody needs some guidance to pass the CPA. Canadian students take classes. So, and they get some case writing in university. In India, I don't know, but I have a feeling there's not a lot of case writing in university. I know in your exam, there's not case writing. So when you say, do you need classes, you need some level of instruction. Whether you watch the classes live or video, that does not matter so much. That does not matter. Because we answer questions, I'll talk about that in a few minutes, we answer questions from students all the time. The only difference between watching a video and a live class is you can't ask a live question during the class. You'll have to wait till after the video and then email or WhatsApp us with your question. So most people do mean, most people do need some level of guidance on this exam in order to pass. Okay, people, just finishing off the fees. Just an important thing. So most people pay their fees through credit card, and we also offer installment plans where you could pay based on installments. There is no interest, and we're very flexible on how many installments you want to pay. Okay, You basically just tell us about the installments. Basically, we're very flexible on how many installments. So whatever the fee is, you could take that and divide it up into number of installments. It's not that's not a big deal. Okay. Oh, yeah, CPA, no, someone was asking if CPA provides like free sessions and things like that. No, there is material that CPA provides, which you can use in conjunction with our material, but they're not really trying to offer what we're trying to do, which is a course to help you pass. They offer some material. I guess they don't really have classes. I guess in Capstone 2, they may have like some classes, but they're not a prep. You know, you will have some of that material free online, but they're not really doing enough. It's not really a preparatory course the way we are doing a preparatory course. So the answer basically is no. That is not their job. They don't look at it like their job is to help you pass the exam. They disseminate, they give out material, and you can use it if you want. We always say use our material as your main study source. And then if you want to look at their material as a bit of a backup, you could do that and you can look at some of their material. But it's not like you could just take their material, read it, and then go in and write the exam. No, that would be a disaster. That, to be honest with you, would not work. Now, this will also answer a question of that I'm coming back to, that I said I would come back to.
But they are, if I could just interrupt you, somebody was just asking about, do we have a website where material is available online or cases available online? So I'm not sure what you mean by, so we can save on manual dollars. The bottom line is we don't have a huge amount of free material online. We do have some resources that are free on our website, but we have a lot of material that is available to you on our website once you register for the course. The amount of material we have that's free before you register is more limited.
Let's see if I can have a website, right? Like material available. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no, somebody was asking for links in the chat box for the demo material. While Ira's lecturing, I'll post some links for the demo material. Okay. Somebody was asking if we could give them a demonstration lecture link. So Ira, you continue lecturing and I'll post some links.
Sure. Okay. So people, with respect to fees, and this ties in when you're writing the exam, look at the total fees. We're saying that it's approximately $4,000 US. How do we get this? Our course, what we showed you before, let's say option 1 was $16.95 plus the $250. This is Canadian, $19.45. Now you have to pay the institute, just like in India, you pay the institute. You have to pay the institute $125. And there's, sorry, if someone could mute their microphone. There's an annual student fee of, let's say, about $600. I'm using Ontario as an example. It's about the same for all the provinces. And then to write the exam itself, you have to pay $1,500. This is the total cost if you're in Canada, $4,170. And then, because you have to fly to Canada to write the CFE, add in approximately, I don't know, approximately $1,500. That's $5,670 Canadian or $4,100 US. Now, somebody had a good question before. I don't remember who, but it was a good question. What if I sign up for May and then I want to write in September? Oh, News, that's a good question also. I'll answer a sec. What if I sign up in May and then I want to write in September? What I said before, there is no additional fee to pass. The registration fee, there is the registration fee, you've already registered, so that's not going to change. Here is where there could be a difference, the annual fee. So if you are writing later on, I guess you could say to me, I didn't really have to pay the annual fee at the beginning. I could pay it later and I would have saved some money, and that's true. So depending on when you registered in the year, okay, you pay a little more if you register for the annual fee. You pay more if you register in the last 6 months of the year versus the first 6 months. So people, let me be very specific. Let's pretend you register now for May. It's November. You register now for May and you pay an annual fee, but they only charge you for 6 months because it's the last 6 months of the year. Then you decide, I don't want to write in May. I want to write in September 2023. I want to write in September. So you didn't really need to be registered for this 6 months. You could have registered in January. So I guess that would be a bit of a waste. You spent a few $100s because you registered now when you could have waited until January to register. But you didn't, the 1945, that's our fee. You didn't waste that. That's going to be the same thing. You just move into the next batch. Now, what about the C fee? The annual fee, yes, it's compulsory. What about the C fee? About 3 months before the exam, you have to pay that $1,500. So let's say in May, you're writing in May. Let's say in January, February, March, April, May. It's 5 months actually. I don't know. Actually, not Jan. I don't know. I'm not even sure which month it is. Okay, probably. I don't know if it's January. It's probably maybe March. Let's say in March. Let's say in March, what they do is they give you 30 days to register and pay $1,500 to write the exam in May. So you go in March and you pay the $1,500. By then, you'll probably know if you're writing in May. But let's say you change your mind after March. Let's say in April, you decide, I don't want to write this May. I'm not ready. I don't want to write in May. I want to write in September. And you've already paid $1,500. They will, this is the institute, they will keep some of that $1,500. What they had before COVID, they had a sliding scale. Depending on when you told them, they would give you back. So if you told them very close to March, maybe in April, they would give you back 75%. And then if you told them a month later, they would give you back 50%. They had a sliding scale where they would not refund the whole amount. They would refund part of it. But people, that is not such a big deal because you cannot sign up for the C fee now. It's much closer to the actual exam. So you'll probably have a much better idea if you're writing in May or September by the time you sign up for the C fee. I'm not saying it never happens that someone signs up for the exam and then they change their mind. I can't do anything about that cost. It's not a cost you pay us. It goes to the institute. But I'm just saying it's not such a big deal. You're not signing up for the C fee 10 months in advance. You're not even allowed to do that. It has to be in the month. I believe for September, the month is May. That's when you sign up for the C fee, in May. So if you're writing in September 2023, you cannot sign up now. You have to wait till May. And then at some point in May, you could do it the last day of May, you would sign up for the C fee and you'd have to pay that $1,500. Okay, does anyone have any questions on the fees?
And just to add, for people writing in May, they wouldn't sign up until February.
Oh, is it February? That's the month?
Yeah, it's February for May.
Oh, okay. Thank you. February. Okay. Now, just some very quick, like housekeeping things, almost done. Just give me a couple minutes. As we said before, the way this works is you register with the February thing. Sorry, Samita wants me to repeat the February thing. As Michael just said, in February is when you would pay for the C fee, that $1,500, if you're writing in May. If you're writing in September, you would pay in May. They open up registration for the exam itself for 30 days. In February for the May C fee, and in May for the September C fee. Okay. All right. So look, As we said before, you register with one of the provinces. Ontario is the biggest province where people from India live and write the exam, but it doesn't matter. You can write the exam in any province. Okay, the West would be second. Registering, just so you understand, registering has nothing to do with our course. In other words, when you register with the Institute, it is irrelevant. We have many students who start studying with us and they have not yet registered with the Institute. Now, let me be very specific. If you want to write in May, this coming May, 2023, you should start the registration process now. Ontario takes about 8 to 12 weeks to register you. You have to get into the system. You email them, they find out who you are, they start asking for things. As long as you have an Indian CA, it will not be a problem to register. We are not worried about that. As long as you have an Indian CA, you can register with an institute. It just takes time. They ask you questions, emails back and forth. So if you're writing in May, you should start the process now. Because if you wait until January, they will say it's too late. It takes us 8 to 12 weeks. Too late to write in May. We'll let you write in September. So don't wait till January. But if you're writing in September, wait until January. Why do you need to be registered now to write in September? You don't. You're just going to pay an extra fee for nothing. So don't register now for September. That's a total waste of money. Sign up with us so you can start studying. Yes, that makes sense. But wait till January to register. Then in January, you register. Someone is asking, does it matter which province you register? So what I kind of said before, doesn't matter which province. The only impact of this, whatever province you register, you write the exam in that province. That is the only reason it matters. But no, it does not matter from a working perspective. It does not matter from a living perspective. You want to register in Ontario? You have to write the exam in Ontario. You want to go live in Vancouver? Go live in Vancouver. Before or after. Doesn't matter. All that matters is whatever province you register with, that is where you write the exam. You register in Ontario, you write in Ontario. You register with Vancouver, with BC, British Columbia, you write in British Columbia. Okay? All right. Yeah. Details relating to the study. Okay, one second. Just give me a sec for the visas, and I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, yeah, I just said this, people. It is an important point. I just said it before. You start the pass course, you start studying now. You do not have to be registered. Ontario is longer, by the way. Registering out west, CPA with the Western School of Business, WSB, Western School of Business, is quicker. Okay, doesn't matter. Like I say, it doesn't really matter how long they take. Okay, I've already said this. Wherever you register, you can work and practice in any province. It doesn't matter, but you have to write the CFE in the province in which you register. Okay, I already said this. These are some useful links to help you in Ontario. Some links about becoming a CPA, international students. You can see these links. They should help you. These are links for the Western School of Business. We will give you the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, and just contacting us, people, look, we are on WhatsApp. Okay, these are our WhatsApp numbers. Okay, you can do Skype, whatever. These are our emails. That's our website. So people that we do answer, we give a lot of support throughout the whole program. Both Michael and myself are answering questions all the time from students. Now, people, look, I will tell you flat out, myself nor Michael, we are not immigration experts. Okay. So please keep that in mind. Asking questions about a visa and stuff like that. Look, COVID obviously made the immigration process more difficult, but our experience has been it is not very difficult for people from India to immigrate into Canada. It does take time. People are waiting longer than they used to for the PR. But because the program is flexible, even people that are waiting, that have signed up for the program, in some ways, they're just studying more. Eventually, they'll get their PR. Eventually, they'll get their permanent residence, they'll get their PR. But from a timing perspective, it has taken longer. But because we're very flexible, and because, you know, you could sign up and say, okay, I want to write in May, and then move it to September, and then move it to May, and you continue to have access to everything, you're not really wasting any money there. The only potential money you might be wasting is if you register with the Institute, you may pay a few $100s now when you could have waited to pay that few $100s later.
If I could just add, because we're not experts on immigration, you'll see on the last slide in the PowerPoint deck, we actually do provide you with links to a video that was put together by an expert on immigration. You can see the YouTube link on the last slide, which Ira hasn't gotten to yet. So that will give you more information on how to get your PR, how to get your permanent residency in Canada. When it comes to getting your visa, as I mentioned earlier, it really depends where you write. If we mentioned registering in Ontario versus Western Canada. If you're registering to write in Western Canada, which would mean you're planning to write in Manitoba or Alberta or Saskatchewan or BC. Vancouver is in BC. So there are many Indian CAs who go to Vancouver. So if you're registering with one of the 4 Western provinces, as I mentioned earlier, would contact the same business. We provided you with contact information on a previous slide, and they would assist you in getting the study visa. In order to get the study visa, you would need to show that you're registering with a designated learning institution, and CPA Western School of Business would provide you with the necessary documentation. So it should be no problem at all to get the study visa. If you're writing in Ontario, and Ontario don't really care what kind of visa you come on. So as long as Immigration Canada will allow you to write this exam based on a tourist visa, and you should be able to write it, you're allowed from an Immigration Canada perspective, you can write this exam based on a tourist visa will suffice. So getting a visa should not be a big issue. If you're planning to have your PR, and there's really no COVID, it was very, there were huge delays and huge backlogs with regard to the PR, as Ira mentioned, but my understanding is that things are getting quite a bit better now. So I just wanted to clear that up with regard to the visas. Also, somebody asked earlier, we didn't have a chance to answer this because we were talking, we didn't want to digress from what we were dealing with. Somebody asked about the range is tremendous depending on the amount of work experience you have. It can be anywhere from about $65,000 to literally over $200,000. So it really depends on the amount of experience that you have. On the last slide, we have a link to Life in Canada. That's a video we did a couple of years ago, and we actually do give you in that video, we give you ranges for salary depending on the particular area you're working in. So I would strongly recommend that you watch you watch both of these links. One of the links on the last slide deals with immigrating to Canada. If you haven't already dealt with that, you might want to watch that video. And the other link on the last slide deals with Life in Canada. That's the link that will tell you what it's like to live in Canada and will give you further information on salaries. Please, Art.
Yeah, here's the slide that Michael is talking about. Here are the links. Someone's asking to get a recording of the session, so we have to speak to Mr. Atul. we have to speak to them about, but I believe, yeah, that a recording should be, I'm guessing, made available. Okay, so look, we understand there's a lot of details here. We understand, people are far away from Canada, and is not that close to India. Basically, we do provide a lot of support throughout the whole program. We are available by email, by WhatsApp. We answer questions all the time from students. So we really do, and there's 2 of us. So we really do provide a lot of support, and we are the teachers. We teach the course. So, we generally can answer whatever questions you have. To summary, who are working full-time, who know nothing about the Canadian CPA or the Canadian CFE, and we have been able to train them somewhere between 6 months and a year, and they can write and pass this exam. This is very doable. The pass rates are much higher, even for Indian students, than the pass rates in India for the actual CA exam. There is no official pass rate for people from India, but Canadian students, the overall pass rate is about 74%. Indian students might be a little less because it's a new type of exam. Maybe it's in the 60s, we don't really know. But that has kind of been like our experience. So this is very doable. You could do this anywhere. You can study entirely in India, anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter. Canada for 3 to write the exam. Starting early is very important. You do have to practice the cases, but it's not a full-time job. You work full-time, you study. Technical review is important. Knowing your technical is important, but it really is a combination of case writing and technical combined. And as Michael said, you don't need to know all your technical before you write cases. You do both combined. And you learn some of your technical. Let's make sure, do I have other questions here? Okay, and as Michael said, if you want to see a couple of, these are not that long, immigrating to Canada or life in Canada, here's a couple of videos that you can, that you can watch that will give you, all right. Someone was asking about the professional opportunities. Look, as I was saying before, there's a lot of professional opportunities. PwC, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, medium-sized firms. You can work in industry. You can work in a bank. I don't think that's so different than in India. I mean, there's a lot of professional opportunities if you have a CPA. It is a very respected degree. It's a very respected degree. So under the professional, that would be advantageous as well. So when you combine the 2 of them, the professional opportunities are really good. Yeah, sorry, Mike.
I'm sorry. If I could just add, Ira and I just a couple of weeks ago were at a presentation that was put on by the ICAI Toronto branch. And what they did was they brought in a number of resource professionals from a number of industries. And the common theme was right now, there's a huge demand for Canadian CPAs and there just aren't enough around. So it's very much an employee's market right now. It's a great time to be looking for a job. I was at this event, I was speaking to one of my former Indian students, and he was saying to me that he notices a huge difference today versus when he first came to Canada in 1987, so it's quite a long time. And I really can't remember a period where there was such a huge demand. The firms cannot get enough people, and neither can industry.
Okay, thank you, Michael. But the truth is, not contradicting what Michael is saying, but even in times where there wasn't such a big demand, it's always been a very respected degree. Okay, so people do have a lot of opportunities, even in times when the demand is not as large. It's a good degree, so you're a professional, and it's a respected degree. Okay. Now, yeah, I think, yeah, people will provide, we'll be speaking afterwards, but yes, we'll provide the PowerPoint and the recorded recorded session.
For the PowerPoint.
Yes.
It has been uploaded to the CIRC website.
Okay, great. And the recording of the session will be on the YouTube channel. Beautiful. Okay, excellent.
Right.
Okay, now, people, did we miss? Okay, what did we miss? Did we miss any questions here? We're trying to answer questions as we went along.
Do we have any more questions from the attendees? Please post them on the chat box. Someone is asking about the study visa.
Yeah, yes,
someone is asking, is there any placement program? So there's no official placement program, but one thing we do tell people is to contact the ICAI when they come to Canada. So either if they're in Ontario, let's say in Toronto, the ICAI, we work with them very closely. Looking for out west in Vancouver, you would contact the ICAI, who we also deal with in Vancouver. Someone is also asking about, are there multiple papers in capstone 3? Okay, there is no capstone 3. As Michael said, day one of this exam is one case, 4 hours. Day 2 is 1 case, 5 hours. Day 3, 3 cases between 70 and 90 minutes, 4 hours in total. So you get a booklet, a hard copy booklet. 3 cases are in the booklet. They tell you how much minutes for each one. It's up to you to stick to the minutes. That's important. And you have 4 hours to write all 3 questions. Okay. And as Michael said, they mark day 1 separately from day 2 and 3. Day 1 is by itself, pass, fail. Day 2 and day 3, they mark together, pass, fail. So if you pass day 1 and fail day 2, 3, you would only have to rewrite day 2, 3. You're done day 1, or vice versa. Okay, the fee structure. I think we talked about that. I'm not sure this question of what's a 10-year class and pass in this fee structure. I'm not sure I understand that question exactly, but if you look at the PowerPoint, we talked about the fee structure like before for the whole course. Again, if you want to be more specific, if I haven't answered it. Yes, Deepak is asking, is it an open book exam? Michael said this at the beginning. Yes, you have the handbook. Those are all the accounting rules and the auditing and the Tax Act. As Michael said, the Tax Act is not very useful. So it is an open book exam, but only with the handbook and the Tax Act, nothing else. Just those 2 sources. Other than that, it's not open book. The handbook is very helpful because accounting, financial accounting is the biggest area. And now that you have that, a lot of people copy and paste from the handbook. So the handbook is very helpful. How much time to complete the CFE? As we said, somewhere between 6 months and a year, working 10 to 15 hours a week. Starting now for May is perfectly fine. We even have students that start later. If you tell me you're only working part-time and you have more time, you can start even later. But no, you don't want to start studying a month or two before. That would not go well. You need more practice on the case writing. Starting now for May is perfectly fine. Starting now for September is also good. Canadian students take 1 to 2 years to get through this whole process. You don't need as much time. You don't have to write the exams they have to write. They have to write other exams Michael described. But starting now for May or something like that is perfectly fine. That's an interesting question. What is the pass percentage of students in CPA Canada? Oh boy. I don't really know. Sorry.
What are we clear on what that question means?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that question means. I think what you're asking, are you asking like, yeah, the pass percentage? I think what you're asking is, look, how many students pass the exam? As I said before, the national Canadian rate is 74% approximately. It changes every year very slightly, about 74%. There is no official pass percentage for students internationally or from India. Even if there was, they would never disclose it. We know from our students, it probably is a little lower because you have to learn the case writing, and it's a whole new type of process. But as we keep saying, we have been very happy. It's working, and we are passing a ton of students from India. So I don't know the exact pass rate also because we don't follow up and call every student after the exam to find out if they passed or not. Many of them send us emails and tell us, thank us, or tell us if they didn't pass, and we keep track of all of that. So I don't know the exact pass rate, but we're not talking 10, 20%. We're talking way more. Okay, it's I believe, I can't say this 100%, but I believe it's way over 50%. Is it 70? Is it 65, 60? I don't know. I just know the number of people that come back to us and tell us, and a ton of people are passing. I will tell you very honestly, the people that don't pass the first time, a lot of times that is because they started very late, or they did not write enough cases. It's very late, or they're not as familiar as they need to be with the case writing. That is a big part of it. So just let me just, Michael, just 1 sec, to be very specific. We talked before about all these cases we give you and we tell you to write them, and you give them back to us and we mark them. We don't force you to write them. We want you to write them. We want you to write them. But what if you don't write them? You get busy. That's not great. We want you to write them. The more cases you write. So we do have students that are unsuccessful. They didn't write half the cases. I asked that question after people call me and they tell me they were unsuccessful. We asked them, when did you start studying? Did you write all the cases? I'm not saying 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, the answers I will get, well, I got really busy. I know in the month of May, you had 4 cases. I only wrote 2 handed in, or wrote them, but they bother handing 1 in, so I didn't get any feedback for that one. We need you to do the work, do the cases, and then your chances are very, very good of passing this exam. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just wanted to come back. People were asking earlier about getting jobs in Canada. One point I just wanted to add was when we were at this event on by the Toronto chapter of the ICAI, they brought in a couple of executive search firms to speak. So I'm assuming that these are firms who would help Indian CAs. So I've just put it in the chat box, the 2 executive search firms or recruiting firms, what we call in Canada headhunters, that came to the conference. One was BIPOC Executive Search, the other was Robert Half. So you may, if you when you're in Canada and you're looking for a job, it may be a good idea to contact these firms. Okay. I also see that there were just a couple of other questions that still need to be answered. How much tax knowledge is required for passing the CFE? The one is to emphasize going over what you need to know is that unless you choose tax as your role on day 2, the amount of tax that you need to know is somewhat limited. You need to know basic compliance. You need to know how to calculate corporate taxable income, personal taxable income. So again, the real complexities of tax you don't need. The weighting of tax is not that high. The weighting is much, much higher for financial accounting and management accounting. I know that somebody was asking about remaining associated with PASS till the exam is cleared. One of the nice things about PASS is that you will have access to the PASS resources until you pass, however long it takes you. That you'll also have access to Ira and myself until you pass. So PASS never cuts off a student before they've passed. That's something I think is very, very important. I'm not sure what you mean. Somebody asked, what is the validity of the batch and pass? I just answered that basically you're with PASS until you pass.
Right. So if you're unsuccessful, we keep you in the course, you write a second time, you continue to attend classes, whatever you like. We update the material, we post updates online, you print off the updates, and now you have an up-to-date binder. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any here.
Do we have any more questions? I think we are done with respect to the questions.
Great.
So, thank you, Mr. Wolfish and Mr. Levy, for that wonderful session. I think we've come to the conclusion of today, and I'd like to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's you woke up at a very odd hour for this session.
It was our pleasure.
So
We really
specifically-
appreciated the opportunity.
And I think the tagline that you just said is very, I mean, could be useful in the future as well. You're with PASS until you pass. I think that's the USP of your school. Thank you for the wonderful session once again. And I'd like to invite Anand for the vote of thanks.
I think you're muted.
Please continue, Anandji.
Everyone, I see Anand Gupta from Kanpur. It has been such an honor to be a part of this wonderful web. So down there, and I think today's webinar helpful. It is very helpful for them to go there and to how we get there and how we settle down there. Now I would like to thank you and to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest, CA Ira Wolfe and CA Michael Levy, and to CA Atul Malhotra, Chairman of CIRC, CA Lokesh Maheshwari, Secretary of CIRC, and the moderator, CA Rohan Malhotra. Thank you. Sincere thanks to all the members who handled the webinar throughout, and thanks to all the participants who made the webinar memorable one and the successful one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anandji. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. We very much enjoyed this session. And I provided you with contact information. By all means, if any questions come up after the seminar, by all means, please feel free to either email us or WhatsApp us. We'll be happy to answer any further questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you
You're
for now.
welcome.
Thank you for now.
Take